Well, the word critical realism means a number of different things. Usually it means something like, look, there is a reality there, but actually we're involved in the process of knowing. So actually the process of knowing modulates what is known. Bhaskar is going further. He's looking at the social location of knowledge, which is a very important point. But his key point is this: ontology determines epistemology. The way things are affects the way in which we know them and the extent to which they can be known. Now, once you realize that, then you can see immediately that that has massive theological implications. How do we know God? Maybe God has to disclose himself because we can't know God, and so forth, all sorts of things like that. But it also hammers home this key point that you cannot simply use one research method and expect it to disclose everything. It doesn't, it can't.
And so is that because effectively ontology determines the epistemology, so because the ontologies are different, the epistemologies have to be different. Is that what you're saying? That's
what I'm saying, that we think of multiple levels around. For example, let's think about you and I. I mean, I'm made up of atoms and molecules. So are you. So is everyone listening to this. And we could use one research method to look at that.
That's one level of ontology.
One level. Then we might say, actually, no, there's a lot more to us than that. There are biological organs that function in certain ways. All of us are metabolic processing units, which we are. Then you have to say, but there is much more that needs to be said. And you add the levels. And in the end, you say, look, humanity is so complex that actually all we can do is identify the various levels. And those people who are very silly and say we are just nothing but atoms and molecules haven't even begun to understand how science works, because it recognizes the complexity of the reality to be investigated and develops research methods to look at each of those levels, realizing that the whole is greater than the parts. The whole idea of emergence is this very complex notion that certain things start to happen at higher levels which you could not predict on the basis of a knowledge of lower levels. And that actually just shoots reductionism out of the water, because you realize you cannot have a kind of physical or biological determinism. There's always going to be complexity at higher levels.
But you could still be a kind of physicalist and say there are multiple levels of reality without there being a religious level.
You could, but you would have to add a very big PS, a very big footnote, which is, but that could be fitted into this picture very easily indeed, which is the case.
And so if you were to look at the example of disability, there's different levels. What would be the religious level?
There are lots of ways. Think about relationality. It's a very, very natural human capacity. You cannot even begin to talk about that in terms of metabolic processing units or atoms and molecules. But lying behind that is some fundamental human need to relate to something that's significant and other. You can see where that takes you religiously very, very quickly indeed. And likewise, these deep feelings we have of a longing for transcendence, a sense there is something beyond our intellectual boundaries, well, what's that all about? And so there are lots of places you can open this up for theological exploration.
Someone could nevertheless say, well, we have this longing for the transcendent, we have this longing for relationality, but those are, either adaptive. Those are adaptive things, psychologically adaptive things from our past, or maybe they're misfirings of our genes, but they're not real.
And you could explain them away as byproducts of an evolutionary process or simply invalid cognitions. Yeah. But you see, the point is, we have these things, right, and we're just not happy with those explanations. We sense there's something more to them than that. And the other point is, those are explanations which are, in effect, emerging from a worldview. If I can put it like this, Dawkins knows about these feelings, but he's locked into his own worldview. So within his worldview, he in effect says, well, they can't be right, so they have to be this. What I'm saying is, look, we need to keep possibility. These are deep intuitions that are meant to be there and are pointing us in some very good ways. I mean, I have an intuition I'm hungry, and that's biologically important, because if I don't sort this out, I'm not going to survive. And there is a correlation between the perceived need and food supplies. If I have this deep intuition that there is something that will give me significance and value and enable me to live a good life, I mean, what's that pointing towards? Dawkins says nothing, you've just made it up. I'm not so sure. For me, it's saying, look, maybe there is something which once found changes everything. And that's what I found in my own journey of faith from atheism to Christianity. So Dawkins has yet to make that pilgrimage, but, I want to say there's something there waiting to be found.